welcome to another episode of the Cartoonist Consultant Podcast. I'm your host, Zoe Zuzu Cartoon Sug, and I figured in the wake of this pandemic, I had a lot more time suddenly to record, and y'all probably could use some more content. So I went ahead and got a couple of new episodes planned, and we should be able to get a somewhat regular release schedule happening while we all hang out in our various homes and apartments and wait for this to pass. If you're sick, definitely extending my best wishes. If you're healthy, stay inside and stay that way. Much love to everyone out there. So, like I said, I've found myself with suddenly a ton of time to be doing creative things that are not going to conventions. And so I figured I would share my list of pandemic to do items. There's not really a super common theme here because it's all just things that I personally have been meaning to get around to. But they do all have to do with launching a new project or just being a cartoonist in general. The first thing I'm going to share is Calligrapher, which is an amazing font building tool. So, yeah, just, stick around and listen to what I've been up to, and hopefully I inspire you to try a couple of things yourself, or at least provide you with some entertainment in these harsh times. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is a website called Calligrapher, and that's Calligraphr. There's no E at the end. I want to talk about this website because I'm just still really excited about it. I used it for the first time last night, and it's incredible. This site actually, and I'm just going to take this right from their website, lets you transform your handwriting and calligraphy into fully functional vector fonts with their browser application. So what that means is that you can actually print out a template. With your handwriting, you can actually go over the template and write out the alphabet, all of everything you would need in a font, right? Your exclamation points, percentage signs, everything. And then import that template in through their application, and it will translate that all into a font. And then you can actually have a OTF or TTF file that you can just download into your computer and install as a font on your computer. So this is already pretty cool, right? You get to use your handwriting as a font, which at the very least saves you money because you don't have to pay for a font license. But it's also just neat to see your handwriting, on the page. Like, there's a lot of us who enjoy the look of handwritten lettering, but just don't have the patience or don't have the concentration to actually sit there and letter everything. Yeah, I'm a big fan of listening to music when I work. And so inevitably, if I try to hand letter anything, I'll get 2 words into my sentence, and then all of a sudden the lyric will make its way in there, and then I, step back from the page. I'm like, wait, what the fuck did I just write? So I really enjoy using font just for ease of use, for time, and just to save myself the headache. But then kind of the problem that I had with using any fonts that are or look handwritten, because before I discovered Calligrapher, I was using CC Wildwords from comicbookfonts.com. Actually, I have to look real quick at where this thing came from. I'm sorry, that was Comicraft. So Comicraft has the font CC Wildwords. That's what I've been using in most of my work, honestly, since I bought the font, because it's a nice looking font, it's easy to read, and I'm a cheap ass. But, you could always tell it was a font, right? If anybody had any question about whether or not I had hand lettered it, all they had to do was compare two letters and they would be exactly the same shape. So if I were to write it seemed weird, SEE, those are two E's right together, it's very, very easy to just look at it and be like, oh, these two E's are exactly the same, this is a font. So what I actually tried to build this back in college and just completely failed. What Calligrapher does is it has a randomization element. You can actually import two sets of alphabets, and then as you're just typing along in your font, it will throw up different one E from each alphabet. Sometimes it'll be the same E, it is completely random, which set of letters it decides to choose from. And so, if you have then your word written out, seam, those two E's could be different E's. So getting into the different features of how this website works, because, you're probably hearing me and going okay, well, but, two alphabets, seam could also use the same E from your first set of alphabetical characters, and then everybody could still tell. And you're right, you're definitely right. There's also some issues with kerning and spacing and stuff like that It's cool because it's janky and so it looks more handwritten, but like, if you want to like tighten it up, you have to make sure that you're actually following that template really closely. And there's some concerns there. Calligrapher actually does address most of those for a fee. So I'll kind of go into the features of like what I use and what they offer. So last night I just got into their browser, registered and used their free application. For their free, you have a max number of characters that a font can contain, and mine was 60. So with that, you cannot do capital letters, lowercase letters, and all of your special characters like your exclamation points, number signs, percentage, etc. But the neat thing about making comics is that traditionally comic books have always been lettered in all capital font. I don't write that way. I actually tend to write grammatically correct. But when I'm translating from a script into the program that I letter in, you can do this in Google Docs, which is what I work in. But I know you can also do it in Microsoft. I'm sure you can do it in OpenOffice somewhere. You can go up to the top where the characters are and you can select capitalization. So that's what I'll usually do is I'll highlight my entire script, change everything to a capital case, and then go ahead and just port it into my computer program where I'm working. I do that because spell check does not always recognize if you're writing in all capitals. Like sometimes it thinks something's an acronym when it's really just like a horrible typo. So I write just with regular prose casing, and then I actually translate it to capital, and then I put it in through my computer into the program where I'm lettering my comic books. So what that means is that I don't really need to have lowercase letters in my font. So what I did was all of the capitals and all of the special characters, and I actually only had 58 characters at that point. I didn't even use my full 60. The other thing that Calligrapher has for free, which is, probably much much cooler of a feature, I guess, in Pro, is that, as I said, it does character randomization. It's freaking amazing, and with the free font, you can only do two different variants. So it's two different sets of whatever glyphs you're, creating. In the Pro version, you can do up to 15. So like that's huge. I mean, honestly, I don't know if anybody, I'm sure somebody would be able to tell, but they'd have to be like kind of a psycho if they were gonna like sit there and go like word balloon by word balloon looking for duplicates on every single page of your comic or graphic novel or whatever. So honestly, like it looks so much like original handwritten lettering at that point that like I don't necessarily know that there is a difference in the quality of the work. But there are people that, just really like the process of hand lettering and like that authenticity, in which case, yeah, this is a font. This is only, 15 variants if you're going to go with all 15. But both of those features were amazing for me. I also did go through their pro plan and I found that they have some other pretty cool things that, I mentioned like kerning and ligature adjustment, stuff like that. A lot of that comes with the pro package. And the other thing is, I work in web design, so I'm pretty used to like, we call it the quote unquote freemium model, where something starts free. But if you want all the good features, you gotta pay for pro. Um, their pro package for Calligrapher is like super cheap. It's $8 for a month, or it's for $4 per month if you do a 6 month like package. So it's super affordable. It's an amazing program. I'm so happy I found it. I'm so happy I didn't have to build it. um, but yeah, it is the coolest. I love it. And I'm really happy that I sat down and actually did it. I did have to sit down with the template. I had to run through it about 4 times before I made a template that I really, truly enjoyed. There were some apparently I don't write in like a consistent height. So my Z's and my D's were all like super duper short, and then like my all my vowels were like really, really long. So I had to like sit there and like auto adjust everything. But all in all, even with like trial and error and being super nitpicky, it took me like 4 hours, which is kind of, it's hard to sit down and like do something for like to motivate yourself and do something for 4 hours, but I have all the time in the world right now, so I sat down and knocked it out, and I'm so happy I did. So excited to like get in there and start playing with it. And no problems so far. Oh, I will say I'll amend that. The font loads kind of slow on the program that I'm using. Like if I'm just typing out in like Arial or something, all of my keystrokes will appear as I hit the buttons. If I'm using my calligrapher font, it doesn't necessarily all show up on the page like at the same time. Like it's missed a couple of keystrokes. So I'm not sure, that might just be my program that I'm using, or it might be like an issue with the actual font file. They do give you open and true type files, so I may try installing my TTF and seeing if that makes a difference. Yeah, we'll see. Overall, I'm very very happy with it, and I only had the free version. I would definitely encourage you to give the pro version a shot if you wanted to. And just to piggyback on, using Calligrapher and kind of finally getting around to setting aside the time to do that, I don't have a whole lot of other programs right now that I am trying to learn. Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable in a lot of the ways that I do things, but yeah, there's always more things to explore. Like I have not done any animation in Procreate yet, which is like one of the things that I'm like, oh, I may, when I think of a project to use for that, I may give that a shot. In general, I would just say like go through all of your old bookmarks, go through all of those old like notes on your phone that you haven't gotten around to addressing yet, and just see like what things you've been meaning to learn recently. I know I could probably find more if I wanted to, so that's probably a good way to fill time while we all hang out at our homes. The next couple things that I'm going to get into are significantly more loose and much less structured, but I've been able, with the time that I have recently, to take a deep dive into a lot of reference material for Quantum Hereafter. That series is so much fun, but also so complicated because it involves using Wicca theory to manipulate quantum physics. It involves time travel through quantum physics. And the whole thing, the aesthetics are all inspired by a particular genre of music that I discovered, I don't know, fairly recently, a couple of months ago, called Vaporwave. And Vaporwave is just this little, it's a rabbit hole. I mean, any kind of genre of music is. It is a weird combination of commercial music and aesthetics combined with music. I'm gonna call it music. It is music, but it's also like muzak ripped from like 80s mall scenes. It's like resampled commercials. Like there's a lot of it's an audio collage is what it is really, and it's amazing. But it's also, like I said, a pretty giant wormhole to just kind of fall into. So what I've been doing is making all of these like different, Pinterest boards, or like saving things on Instagram because you can kind of categorize them into their own folders that way. Yeah, I've just been saving all of these things tagged vaporwave, and kind of vaporwave is a weird offshoot of the lo-fi electronic genre. So I've also been grabbing a lot of like lo-fi screenshots and things like that. And it's been nice because it's been able to give me just a fresh perspective on the kind of aesthetic I'm shooting for in this comic. One of the things that I realized as I was making these boards on Pinterest is I went through my Instagram feed, and I've talked before in past Instagram podcast episodes. I'm kind of bad about like keeping a consistent theme on the first 9 posts of my feed, and so I was really trying to get better about doing that. Well, I went back and I looked at it, and yeah, it's all one project. No, it is not all the same aesthetic because I've done sketches, I've done like some reference photos of some things, I've done color studies, and so when you go and look at the front page, it's still just a giant frickin' hodgepodge. And I'm looking at all of these other things that are, devoted specifically to Vaporwave, and I'm like, oh, there's all these color palettes that I'm not using. These, teals and these blue purples and these pinks and these kind of dusty oranges that I could really be pushing more on the first 9 of my feed. And so, people who are interested in this genre and this aesthetic will kind of be able to go to my profile and see a little bit more about like what I'm trying to aim for with this project. So it helps me in so many ways, right? It helps me recenter how my project's going to look. It helps me plan better for how I'm going to market to that audience. And it's just inspiring. I get to kind of go through and be like, oh, I want to draw a scene like this. Or like, wow, I really want to like use this color palette in something. Like I'm going to find a scene where it's like, a blue department store of the mall, because the whole comic takes place inside a dilapidated mall. But I'm going to do it at like golden hours to get all these like, really pretty like oranges coming through the windows and stuff. And so it's really inspiring and I think nourishing creatively as well. So it's neat and kind of silly how like just sitting there and like grabbing a bunch of like boards, like this is something I would normally do to like waste time at my job, right? Or I would turn on a YouTube video and kind of half pay attention to that and half pay attention to what I'm bookmarking. But when you really take a deep dive and, devote a significant amount of attention to just bookmarking images, you start to actually notice like where you could be making those images even that much better yourself. And kind of on that same level of like just slowing down, really taking time to be almost meditative with your work, I have been really trying to get into doing some deep character work for the Quantum Hereafter story. I think that there's a lot of pressure, at least for me, when I make a project, to script the project, draft it, get it out there, sell it. And sometimes it's because I'm trying to apply for an anthology deadline. Sometimes it's because, I'm sort of ADHD, and so that's like you want that completion reward stimuli, and you want to like do a thing and make a thing and then be done with the thing forever. And I can make good stories, but like if you ask me about the character in Morning Routine, what her parents look like and what her relationship is with them, I couldn't tell you shit. And I didn't need to. That was a 6-page story that went into a horror anthology. And I love it. I'm very happy with the piece. I've had a couple of people, actually, one person at Staple came up and like gave me a hug and like told me thank you for making it and really appreciated what me and my co-creator had to say on the subject. So it's an effective piece of art, I would say. I don't necessarily fault myself for not knowing what, B's relationship with her parents is like. But for Quantum Hereafter, this is a long form story, right? And I'm trying to sell my characters. I'm trying to build hype for who they are, what lives they have. Really kind of post all of these like details and my design process on Instagram. In general, I'm just trying to do a lot more work with my character stories and with how their stories inform their decisions, and then how those characters interact with the rest of this completely ridiculous world that I put them in. So to that end, I actually got to sit down again with one of my favorite technical pieces of writing. Jeff Vanderbeer, well, I'm going to screw up that name just 6 times, aren't I? Jeff Vandermeer's Wonderbook. It's just a big compendium of different like writing tips and tricks. He's got like characters that like help narrate through the different sections of the book, and they talk about like plot design, the hero's journey, whether or not the hero's journey is like the end all be all for everything. And they got a bunch of different like contributors to come in and write about their experience writing as well. So we have like Ursula K. Le Guin and Neil Gaiman both got in there. So it's a really amazing book. I don't know if y'all know Jeff Vandermeer by name, but he wrote Annihilation, which is one of my favorite movies, like probably ever right now. And it's just, it's a good little piece of literature. So I particularly got into his section on character design and building characters. And I have a whole Google Doc now just called Housekeeping, which is all just devoted to like what basically just how my characters think, and what's going to define their outlook on the world. Because at some point I realized that like probably 3 out of 4 of the characters just like have a different offshoot of like depression or something like it. So there a whole scene got written then into the comic where they actually debate about whether or not they want to save the world and whether or not that's their job, because when you have characters like that, they're not necessarily just like motivated immediately to go do that. They're not this like lawful good paladin who's like, oh, we should defeat evil all the time. Some of them kind of don't care. So some of the questions that Jeff Vandermeer asks, because I think that's the other thing too, right? Is that like I think most of us are very used to character building in terms of like what is your bio, characters, hair and eye color, blood type, if you read a lot of manga, favorite outfits, family relationships, pretty but very basic stuff, right? Which is all very good and important to know. But what Vandermeer had me ask was for each, I just made like a list of all of my characters. And it says, what does this character need? What does this character want? How does the weight of everyday existence affect this character? Just some amazing kind of in-depth questions like that, and many of them I realized I didn't necessarily have the answer to right off the bat. And some of them, I think that is also what defines them. Marco is fairly apathetic. He doesn't necessarily know what he wants. I think he would say he wants nothing, maybe just to sleep forever, but as his character arc kind of develops, we'll sort of realize what the basis is for, why he thinks that way. Moira, I don't know yet what she wants. Lexi, they want to be the first person to meld time travel, science, and magic. They want fame. They want recognition. They're basically a mad scientist. Like, I knew like immediately when I ask that question about that character, like what they want. And again, that's kind of different from what they need, right? Because Lexi is one of my favorite characters. They are also an overconfident egomaniac. Also, several of my friends that have read that script went, "Oh, this is the you character, huh?" And they're right. They're absolutely right. So yeah, just giving myself the time to really get in there and analyze and deep dive on the aesthetics of the comic, on how these characters work, all of those really important little details that get lost when you are just focused on, okay, how am I going to lay out the script, lay out this page, and make an 8-page comic for an anthology, or make an 8-page comic for a pitch, because, you can write a good pitch. As I'm discovering while I read this book, having already pitched this comic, there's apparently a lot of things that you can discover post pitch, about your characters. I think most creators will also tell you that. There's been several kind of long form creator interviews that I've watched or read. Or I mean, heck, even not even necessarily professional creators. If anybody out there listens to Adventure Zone, every time they do the Adventure Zone, like the listeners are always writing in going like, "Wow, how long did you know that this character was going to do this, and how much of this was planned?" And the boys are always like, it's not. We didn't know this was happening." They had a campaign, they had an arc, but what those characters do and the details you find out about them, you don't necessarily have to find out immediately. But taking the time to actually deep dive and actually get to know the people that I'm writing about, and treating them as real people, finding out those goals and those nuances about them has been really refreshing, and I think it's only going to help as I continue to create. So I'm really excited for both of those processes. Like I said, both kind of aesthetically and right writingly. Oh God, I'm a writer. I should know how to say that good. I think the final thing for me on this pandemic to-do list is just getting around to doing all of the things that you're supposed to do, right? We all have like a bunch of half-finished sketches laying around. For me, it's recording these podcasts. I have been meaning to get guests kind of scheduled out to do this with me, and just have procrastinated, right? Because it's just kind of hard to reach out and like grab people and ask them for their time, and this kind of weird understanding that we all have right now is, hey, no one's doing anything, so can we all just like meet up online? It's been interesting kind of having that permission to just like hit people up randomly and be like, hey, be on my show. And to that end, there's a couple of creators on this podcast that do listen to this. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to come on and talk, because it's really fun having friends on. And I finally have a good sound room set up. You can probably hear, my voice is just a little bit less screwy, because one of the things that I did was filled in my closet space. So I took a bunch of sound foam and put that up. I got a proper pop filter this time. And again, I'd been meaning to do this for, I don't know, probably months, but finally got around to actually sitting down and knocking the dang thing out recently. So again, just go through your old social media when you've complained about not having time for things. Go through your sketchbooks, your Procreate apps, whatever. And just knock out all the stuff you meant to do. This is kind of the time to be like, well, I have no excuse now. Kind of the time to just sit down and like do everything, and try to be as creative as you can. That I will say, that is kind of the hardest thing for me in all of this kerfuffle, is just staying positive enough to be creative. There are actually a number of professional creators I know out there who have talked about their strategies for staying functional right now. Especially because Animal Crossing just came out, right? The temptation is to just sit down and play video games all day until this passes, which I completely understand. But it's tough. It's definitely tough to be in a decent enough mental state to want to create. A lot of people have just reached out to friends and fellow professionals and just organized like online like hangout times where they all work. My friend Steens has been reposting this app that she uses, which I'm scrolling for here. Okay, it's called App Detox, and it is supposed to keep you off of whatever app you use for social media on your phone, because just it's pretty easy to like pick up your phone and kind of scroll forever. And the app is built as sort of like a productivity tool. To quote Steens directly, Take the initiative and limit yourself from scrolling through panic at all hours of the day, which is very, very true, right? It's hard to disentangle yourself from the negativity that's out there, and it's responsible to go online and keep up with the news and make sure that you are safe, that you're prepared for what's happening. You also don't need to be scrolling 24/7, and it can absolutely negatively affect your mental state, to the point where you can't work. I definitely, the first, I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home with my company right now. And the first, I don't know, maybe 2, 3 days. And my pattern for that time was definitely to just kind of sit down and work and like try to distract myself with 8 hours of work. And then just kind of just turn around and, binge whatever was on Netflix. I'm in like not season, episode 6 of The Witcher right now for that reason, and just kind of, binge some television for a little while and then go back to bed and start that over. I think it took a little bit of adjustment, and like after about the first 2 days, I was okay. I was able to kind of start working again. But one thing that I noticed is that my social media consumption and my news consumption dropped pretty dramatically. It's right now, it's at the level where it would normally be if I were, if there was not a pandemic, if I were going outside and working. Just because that's what's healthiest for me right now. It's what's letting me actually focus on getting the stuff I need to do done and improving my life, because there's not a whole lot I can do in the grand medical scheme of things. I will say a small caveat to that because I've helped out friends and family. There are actually several projects I've seen out there that is some sort of like art for charity type deal. I joined the Patreon stream that happened recently where they donated for a number of people that were attending their online stream. So it was, very easy on my part, and it was able to kind of help out a community a little bit. And, definitely keep your eye out if that's something that you feel called to do, and keep your eye out for how you can help in smaller ways. But, other than that, there's not a whole lot to do, and it's up to us to kind of put our own oxygen masks on first and to make sure that we're healthy and that we're, stable enough to be working and taking care of ourselves during this time. So I have cut back my social media hours pretty significantly just because, that's the only way that I'm gonna be able to deal with most of this. So yeah, just, stay safe out there, everybody. To bring it back around to the point of this podcast, there's a ton of stuff out there that you can still do while you are homebound that will help build your career and your creativity. I absolutely recommend Calligrapher. It's one of the coolest programs I've come across in a long time. Also recommend Jeff Vandermeer's Wonder Book if you want to do some in-depth character work. And I think taking a deep dive on your projects, on your background of your characters, your aesthetics, everything is another great way to fill time, as well as looking for, kind of charitable opportunities out there for helping other people in our community right now. So I wish you the best of luck in all of your creative endeavors. Please tweet or at me and let me know what you're working on, and if you found anything new or cool that you want to share with me, or if you tried anything that I recommended on here. Let me know. I want to see your projects. All right. Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Cartoonist Consultant Podcast, and thank you for listening.